Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mom and I,
Hello, hello.
Unfiltered. My camera's really zoomed in, and I'm really far away from the microphone, so I feel like I'm yelling. But we'll see how it comes out in the edit. Hopefully, I'm not yelling, and my head isn't like massive.
Or like Dad said, your face is so big. To me, well, it is big. I have a big face. Like that's God gave me that.
Well, we don't care if you like it, so we'll start
Except,
off with that again. Uh, all right. So today we're going to talk about staying
yeah,
curious, the key to never being bored, always learning, always asking questions, never losing childlike wonder. And I think, we didn't talk about this. We did minimal prep for this one. We just kind of texted each other a couple bullets. But I think something we should talk about is maybe Nikki at some point. So don't let me forget to
yeah.
bring her up.
Okay.
I think the key to being, how old is she?
100. She'll be 104 this year.
104. I mean, and that woman is definitely curious, always
Always
trying
trying new
things, doing
things.
things, staying at. So maybe we talk about that at some point. But let's start off with what's the last thing you were curious about? What's something you Googled and just kept trying to do?
Okay.
I don't know.
So it's gonna sound so terrible, but it was something I needed to do. I needed to figure out there was a smell coming from the sink.
Starts off good. At least you weren't Googling medical things. That was probably the last thing
No,
I Googled. I'm coughing and I need this.
no. I don't Google medical stuff. It's too frightening. No, there was a smell coming from the sink. Couldn't figure it out. Cleaned the sink, cleaned all the things. Vinegar, and nothing worked. So I'm Googling how to clean like your garbage disposal. It was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah,
So
sounds like a
heads up.
lot. Sounds like people will just say, drop a
That's
lemon
what I
in there.
normally do, but it didn't help. So I Googled it. It was like, you talk about rabbit hole because there's so many people have so many home ways to do it. Finally found one that worked and I'm going to share it. It's cut up a lemon, toss it in there, add some baking soda, add a little bit of water, add a little bit of bleach, put the cover on the garbage disposal, and just let it run. Like you don't add water and you just let it run.
And kill all the fish in
Basically.
the stream.
The worst part of this was that in doing this, I brought the big bottle of bleach in. I tipped it over onto the counter. Bleach went everywhere.
No, it's
No, but good news. Now the kitchen doesn't smell like something in the garbage disposal. It just smells like bleach.
which is also stinky.
But yeah, that was my deep dive. It was crazy to see how many people have the most random things that they put down that garbage disposal, which I don't think that's a good thing.
It's a riveting tip. Maybe we should start a separate series on tips from mom.
But I'll use that one again.
You have a stinky garbage disposal? Have you tried
Now, that would be
everything?
like Heloise. Back in the day, there was a lady named Heloise Helpful Hints. She may still be around. I don't know.
What was it on TV?
She would just show up randomly on these daytime shows. And she'd always have the most amazing tips for things. And you'd go, oh my God, that's great. You'd walk away from the TV and go, what did she say again?
Now everybody uses TikTok for that.
I don't use,
Or Instagram.
I've never
whatever.
used TikTok.
I don't either. I get down a rabbit hole every night. And it's always about something nerdy. I just like to learn how somebody did something. So my buddy Chris, yesterday he put out a blog on him, and I had talked about this a couple months ago. He was asking for a computer that he could use to program that was small. And I was like, Raspberry Pi. If you never heard of it, look it up. You can go down a curiosity hole.
Sounds like a recipe.
But anyway, Raspberry Pi. But he built a if home efficiency monitoring process. He basically got a new hot water heater, hooked it up to smart monitoring, programmed it to be on off peak hours for his energy. And long story short, he made his house more efficient, saving money, but did it through this super nerdy way. And I loved it. I was fascinated with it. But every night I'm always doing something like that. I'm like, oh, what's this about? How can I figure that out? So I don't have a one story. It's just every night. It's something like that.
I would never get to sleep.
Well, I just do one thing and then I read. I'm always read. I have to read before
It is
I go
fascinating, though, the amount of information that's out there, which it's a great time to be curious. It's a great time to be curious.
What does that mean? What do you mean? What do we mean by being curious?
So it's funny. I said something to Dad this morning, and I'm looking at this because when he said today, what's your topic? I said, curiosity. He said, curiosity did not kill the cat, and he walked away.
I
It's
did.
like, okay. Then he came back in the room and he said, lack of risk assessment killed the cat. Now, right, if you're like me, like at this point, my eyes glazed over. I was like, what? Like, now you're above my level of, I don't understand what in God's name you're talking about.
He thought about that for a while.
I guess. And he's got a cold right now. So this is medication brain. And I was like, this is what? So I wrote it down only because I thought to myself, once I thought about it, like it made sense, but no. Curiosity to me is constantly learning, like learning something new. Being curious is, it could be with people, it could be about a thing, it could be anything. Curiosity is you want to learn more about. You don't know something, so you want to learn more about, I think. I think I'm curious every
Do
day.
we lose it? Do we lose it when we get older?
No, I hope not. I mean, I could say at
I
61,
think
I haven't lost it yet.
I think it's up to each
Yeah.
person, right? Some people are just content with what they know, where they are, how life has been, and that's that. And that's fine. But I think it's valuable to, I just can't, there's so much to learn, and you're never going to know all of it. Why not try to find out as much as you can?
You're very good at it. And I think, because again, I think about even the last 2 years of your life, the things that you have gotten involved with, where you've had to learn so many different things that you knew nothing about. For you and for most people, that's very exciting.
Yeah. It's fun to learn new stuff. And then you can find out if you like it or don't like it. And it introduces you to new people and to new ways of thinking. And I mean, we can't be stuck. Nobody wants to be stuck in this, like, you're either A or B, you're red or blue, you're Democrat or you're Republican, you're educated or you're uneducated. Like, that's stupid. We should all want to know what's going on around the world.
I think so too. And my logic has always been, we're only here one time.
Yeah. And that one time could end tomorrow, today.
So be in it and be learning about all these different things, even if it's something that's not even on your radar. I even go back to, 10 years ago, 11 years ago now. I had been teaching an aerobics class for 15 years, 4 times a week. Loved it. Loved every part of it. Loved the people, loved all the things. But it got to the point where I was like, ugh, like, it's just the same old. And I got tired of paying other people money and all the things. So I sold the business, walked away, and thought, okay, I need to keep moving. I need to try something different. And there was this CrossFit program that was just starting in Kennett. And like every time I'd mention it to someone, they're like, you're too old. Like, you're 50. You can't be going to CrossFit. So I walked in because I thought, why not try it? Why not try it? Just see what it's about. 11 years later, like, I'm still going 3 to 4 times a week, and I love it because it's something that I was curious about, stepped out of my comfort zone about, which I also think is part of being curious. You have to kind of step out of your thought process a little bit. Yeah, I think if you don't do that, then you get stuck.
Yeah. It starts as a kid, right? I mean, every kid is curious because everything's new to them. And you mentioned something about Curious George. What did you
Only because
do you want to talk about there?
When you guys were little, Curious George was a big deal. Curious George, everyone I'm sure knows the book. Curious George is a monkey who always, they would say, gets into trouble. Well, he only got into trouble because he was interested in something that was going on around him and would dive into it. It was the best show. It was one of those shows that as a parent, I encouraged you guys to watch because it taught that you could look around you and see, look how much fun that is. Why don't I try that? You know? And I loved Curious George. I think he's still on. I hope he's still on.
Yeah. Yeah. PBS.
I love
PBS
it.
Kids.
PBS Kids.
Yeah, support your local PBS.
My dad, when you would bring the kids up to visit him, and again, at that point, he was in his 90s, or if I would call him and talk about his great-grandchildren to him, he would always say, oh, I'm so jealous. I said, why? He said, because they're curious. And he said, everything to them is new. He said, when you get to be 90 or older, there isn't a lot much more out there that's new. Maybe there's a new show. He said, but when you've lived as long as I have and you've experienced as much as I have, there isn't a lot more that's new. Except me, well, he was always fascinated by what he called my magic machine, which was basically my cell phone. We'd be sitting there, and if something came to his brain, he would call me and say, I need you to look this up on your magic machine. In hindsight, he was still curious at the age of, 93. So I don't think, we don't lose it. We hang on to it from a child to death.
And it is funny because people always say, oh, I hate it when the kids say, why. But that's part of learning. And early on, I, just like probably every parent, was like, oh, can they stop? And you tell them something and they're like, but why? And you tell them something, but why? But then you recognize, hey, they're trying to piece this together in their brain, and this is all connecting dots. And I still do that today, so I can't get mad at them. I just do it differently. My boss tells me to do something. I don't just say, why? I inquire a little bit differently and articulate it with other words, but I'm doing the same thing. I'm trying to figure out, why am I doing this? Why is it important? Why should we do it now? And that's what they're doing.
As a parent, I think it's really hard, at least it was for me. There were sometimes the whys got so deep that I didn't have the answer.
Yeah. That does happen often. And then we're like, okay, let's ask Alexa or let's ask Google, because now I'm out of my depth. And then we end up, it actually does happen quite often, maybe 3-4 times a week, that we will end up watching something on the tablet at breakfast about some random island or some culture or people, because they ask a question 10 like connections away from where we ended. So
I think that's so cool. I love that. Mr. Rogers, when he used to be on, one of my favorite parts of that show, and it wasn't every episode, they would go to a place, whether it was a place that made crayons or a place that made shoes or a place that made cups and saucers. Like, it was a fascinating tour of a factory, and they would show you beginning to end how that product was made. I think that I was probably glued to it even more than you guys ever were. Because again, we didn't have that technology. It was encyclopedia or find a book at the library. It wasn't, we can jump on the computer and find stuff. But I love that. I love that they recognize the whys that the kids wanted to know about and jumped into it.
It's a fun time to be curious because you don't have to. Early childhood, I had to look through the Encarta Encyclopedia, 12 volumes, whatever it was, to try and learn about something. Or you had to go physically to a place, to that place you're trying to learn about, to a zoo to learn about an animal, to the library to get a different book on the topic. Now you can just, it's instant, so it makes it easier. But they still play Mr. Rogers, and the kids don't love it because the puppets are a little creepy now. But
I get it.
They do go through the factory. But now there's a whole channel on that just streams all day on how it's made, I think is one of them. There's a couple of them. One of them's how it's made. And I'll put that on if the kids, if I promise them they could watch TV for a little while or whatever, putting them to bed, I'll put on how it's made because it's a great, you're not going to stay awake for it, but you'll learn something about how something's made. It's pretty similar.
I think it is a fascinating thing. And I like that they, like I said, that they embrace it. Part of the joy for me as a kid, and I remember this very distinctly, we had one huge encyclopedia that was 8 inches tall. It was huge. So they hadn't gone as far as all the single encyclopedias yet. Just the one big guy.
A through Z was one book.
Exactly. And it was giant. But what I remember most is going to look up something and finding something interesting on a different page. So I may have found whatever I was looking for, but then it was kind of like, what was that thing I went by? That was cool. What was that? And that was...
Or sometimes, do you remember when they would have, and I'm sure yours had this too, but it's it would reference another page to say, whatever you were looking up, bananas. and bananas come from these trees and they're from the Caribbean or whatever. And it'd link to that. Do
Yes,
they
they
have
would.
that too?
Well, certainly.
And then you go to that page and you're like, oh, now I'm learning about
Brazil,
the tropics where
whatever.
bananas grow or whatever.
It is. And it was kind of like one thing led to another. So it was old school rabbit hole, basically. It wasn't obviously the computer, but it was, yeah, just sitting there looking this stuff up. And then all of a sudden being like, yeah, no, Brady Bunch is on. I gotta go.
Well, I still do. I love history. And to make the kids curious about that, when we travel now, first off, like if you love your hometown and you never leave it, that's your preference, that's your choice. I respect it. But there's so much of the world out there that doesn't need to cost a bunch of money to go travel. And I think there's so much value in learning about even people in the next town. And I learned that in college when I learned who had things and who didn't have things. A lot of who didn't have things. And that opened me up to, there's a lot more that I need to go learn. And so now when we travel, which we try to do often, because it helps the kids open up their minds to different people, different cultures, different food, everything. We found that Elizabeth and I built a scavenger hunt for them the last time we went to Savannah because I like history. And so I was like, all right, well, let's go show them some historical places, but also some fun places. And it made them curious and excited. So they had a sheet, they had to go find these things. And then when we were there, they'd learn about it. And so when we left, they learned far more than they probably even wanted to learn than they would have otherwise because we provoked their curiosity by making it fun.
Absolutely.
And I think it should be fun. Whatever you're curious about, find a way to make it fun.
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the big deals in school about going on field trips. You know, even teachers recognize that most children learn more by visually seeing something tangible as opposed to reading about it in a book or seeing it in a film or something like that. I love that. I love the idea of the scavenger hunt. I think that's very cool.
I am a hands-on learner. That's how I love to read now. I hated reading until post-college, actually. So up through college, I couldn't learn anything reading. Terrible at tests, not good in school, but I learned so much outside of school by doing things, being with people, seeing stuff. That's when I kind of figured it out. Now I read, but I supplement that with, okay, I read about this. Now I need to go there. You know, I read all of Churchill's volumes. I love learning about Winston Churchill and the man he was, and the time he was in. It's fascinating. And then I got to go to London and go to his museum and put it all together. I think, whatever your learning style is, find a way to put together what's available, which is usually text, with maybe seeing it or trying something hands-on or whatever.
And again, that goes back, that's all part of that curiosity piece of it. And it flows into whether you're, we talked about like different activities that you want to try that you are interested in, or even a job. Even a job. I was approached, this goes back 14 years ago. I was working at a school district. I was an admin. I was doing regular stuff, not a big deal. And I was approached to be an operations manager at a technology firm. First thing in my head was, I can barely use the computer that's sitting in front of me. Why? Why would I do this? But I think the other part of the curiosity piece is, in my head, I said, if I stay where I am, I know what that looks like. If I jump into this other job, I'm going to learn all these new things and meet all these different people. And I don't know what that looks like. So let's jump and see. Because worst case scenario, I hate it. So I leave it and find something else. Big deal. And I ended up being there for 14 years and I learned so much. That learning thing is what keeps those juices flowing,
Yeah. Yeah. Part of, I think you and I have very similar, I don't want to call it's a character trait where we don't like to say no. We like to say yes. And that happens at work, usually to our detriment, because we end up doing too many things. But I like it because it opens me up to new things too. So like now at work, I'm doing marketing, I'm doing sales, I'm doing operations, I'm doing project management. I'm doing a bunch of things that I wasn't hired to do, nor should I be doing, but nobody else is doing some of these things. And people ask, and I say, yes, that's like it's so fascinating to learn different aspects of things, which selfishly will help because it well rounds you and gives you an insight into maybe I want to go try to do this. I've always done operations. Now maybe I want to go do marketing or whatever. So I think it, like we mentioned earlier, it opens up those doors, but you have to be willing to do it. And you learned that firsthand, basically ended up running a business, running a company, even though you were just hired to do an admin job. You ended up doing payroll and customer service and sales and operations and
all the things. I will say, though, I did say no to one job once. It was before Dad and I got married, and I already had a full-time job. Dad was traveling like Monday through Friday for this new job that he had taken. He was in Boston Monday through Friday. And we had a little apartment, and we were saving for our wedding, and a restaurant by the name of Ground Round was open.
Wait. Everybody should Google it right now. Pause the episode, Google Ground Round, and then continue.
It was a great place. I loved Ground Round.
I love free popcorn.
So they were opening one like 2 blocks from our apartment. And I thought, this is perfect. I can go there. I can be a hostess. Now, mind you, I was 20. So I thought, oh, I'm cute. I could be a hostess. I work during the day. I can put people at a table. Like, that's doable. I knew I couldn't be a waitress. That wasn't a thing I could ever aspire to be. I think that's one of the hardest jobs. So I go down there, have my interview. Halfway through the interview, the manager of this particular restaurant said, oh my gosh, you're perfect for this position. And I'm getting all excited because I'm like, I'm going to be a hostess at a Ground Round. He said, but what I want to hire you for is to be our clown on Wednesdays and Sundays. So I said, what? He said, yeah, you'd be perfect for it. Wednesdays and Sundays, be the clown. He said, the best part is, he said, you get the whole outfit. And he said, it's a new nose.
It's new. Nobody else has put their nose on it.
We were sitting there thinking, oh my God.
Could you imagine today going to a high school, rounding up a bunch of teenage girls, and then proposing that job to them? None. They would look at you like you were the weird. You'd probably be arrested.
I just couldn't even believe it. He said, oh, you've got the personality for it. And blah. I said no. And I said, what about the hostess position? He said, oh, no, that's already been filled. You couldn't have told me that 2 hours ago? So I went home. I called Dad in Boston because he knew I was going for this interview. He goes, how'd it go? I said, well, they offered me a job. He goes, that's great. I said, I turned it down. He said, why? And I said, I was going to be Bingo the Clown on Wednesdays and Sundays. Now, reverse that. I call my parents because I'm telling them, my dad is very proud of me. You would be great at being Bingo the Clown on Wednesdays and Sundays. I said, no, I'm not doing that. He said, but I bet the outfit is cool. And they did say new nose.
Get in the positives.
Get in the positive, like only my dad could do.
Yeah. I like learning new stuff. For me, I don't want to be cooped up sitting in here all the time. I want to be outside. But unfortunately, the world doesn't, well, it does. I haven't how do I put this? I would rather be outside than inside. I said that, and we'll leave out the reasons why. But so I've always gravitated toward learning things about outside and how do I do more stuff outside. And that's what, like, from being little, with Dad taking me hiking every year since I was 6, like, that made me fascinated with the outside, learning more about it. And, you know, you and I love to help people. And so the search and rescue stuff just fascinates me. And I love learning more about it. There's so much to know. All the rope skills, rope knots, hoist people up and down places, tracking, within just that little, I'll call it a hobby, but it's a full-time job for a lot of people. But within that little, area itself, there's so many skills that every week I'm fascinated to go try something else, learn something new. And for me, like, that's exciting. I think it's important to, you know, when you talk about jobs, and I need to take this up myself, this advice, be curious about something that you're excited about too. So find out like what's exciting you and go try and learn more about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. Probably cut that part out.
It's okay.
Didn't make any sense.
It absolutely did. And I do think that a lot of people, sadly, don't have that luxury of the advice that I always followed from not only my parents, but also my husband, who will say, if you don't enjoy getting up every morning and going to work to see what that day is going to bring you, you need to find something new. Again, not everyone has that luxury. I was always very fortunate to have that luxury and all the different things that I did when you guys were growing up and things that interest me, I jumped into. But again, I had that luxury of being able to do that, and not everyone does. I want to ask a question. I want to know, and we had, text about this at one point too, but person that you were curious about that you met just randomly, that you kind of like either saw somebody and thought, I would love to chit chat with them and find out more about them. Like, has that happened to you?
I feel like that's probably happened a lot, but I can't, off the top of my mind, only one pops in. It's because she's in the next room. But that was a little different because I just thought she was very attractive and I heard her talking and she was very smart and she had a cool Southern accent. But I don't know. Is there one that
There's one
popped
that
out for you?
popped out for me, but it took me a minute because I too think that, again, you and I are very similar in that we'll just talk to anybody anyways. Like if I walk into a room and I'm basically alone in that room, I'm going to find somebody else to chat with. Like it's just going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stand there and be quiet. I'm going to go find somebody. But I remember one of the first times I traveled by myself. Megan was a baby. So this is 35 years ago. It was the first time I had traveled alone, which is hard for me to even think about. So I was meeting Dad in Florida. I flew into I flew into Fort Lauderdale, and he had already rented a car for me, all the things. I just had to go to the guy and like tell him my name. They were going to give me a rental car, and I had directions to go meet Dad. I got to the rental car desk, and behind him is this wall of glass, and there's nothing but palm trees outside. I must have looked like the biggest fool because I looked at him and I said, do you see all the palm trees behind you? He literally did like this slow turn and looked over his shoulder and came back to me and goes, yeah, we're in Florida. And I said, I have never seen palm trees. He said, you've never seen palm trees? I said, no. So we started this whole back and forth about where he happened to be from the Caribbean. I told him I was from upstate New York. We don't have palm trees. I've seen them on TV, but that was about it. This gentleman, first of all, he upgraded my car. I learned very quickly that that was also a very good thing to do. Chat with these people who give you services. They'll be kinder to you. He upgraded my car. He took me outside, walking me to the car. He's stopping and he's telling me the different kinds of palm trees that I'm looking at. And they aren't native to there, but that they plant them, blah, 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 blah. Takes me to the car, out of his back pocket, hands me an audio tape, cassette tape, which I know no one listening to this probably even knows what that is. Hands me a cassette tape. He goes, this is one of my favorite mixes. And he put it in and he said, this will be great on your drive. And he said, when you return the car, just make sure you find me and give it to me, or my name is on it. One of the guys will give it back to me. I spent 20 minutes with this man. We had the best conversation. To this day, I do think about him because I'm like, God, he was so kind. From the Caribbean, moved there with his family, blah, 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 blah. I love that.
It's cool. I never heard that.
It was a very cool story. I had forgotten about it until I was going through thinking about random people that I have met that I remember walking away and learning something. Like I said, that was one of my first experiences with, if you walk up to someone who's going to provide you a service and you're kind to them and you're genuine with them, it does make a difference. He was so cool. So cool.
That is cool. Yeah. I guess that happens a lot, but you have to be willing to, and it's so hard now because nobody wants to talk to anybody. We're all like overwhelmed with this lack of work-life balance because everything's in your hand all the time and you can't really turn it off. We've got all these activities. There's news. It feels like life has gotten much faster because of the way information is readily available. So, good thing earlier, bad thing maybe now. But I think it's important to still be open, to be curious about the people around you too, not just the topics, but yeah, start a conversation. Nobody wants to talk on a plane, but maybe try it one time. Maybe just make it a short conversation and see if the other person wants to talk. But you do meet so many cool people, and you can open your eyes to new things and have positive experiences from it.
Absolutely. And someone being interested in you, I think is kind of neat too. Because again, like you said, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I love that. I think it's
But there's
fascinating.
so much to learn.
And they may.
There's so much to learn, and we don't have the capacity to take it all in, and we don't have the time. But I mean, it's fun. I think it's fun to
And
try.
I also think it'd be one of those things where you just don't know what they're going to come out with, right? You have no idea. I was recently shopping with some friends not far from here. It's Christmas time. And we were at this little Christmas village walking around. And there was a gentleman outside of this one shop that I ended up going into, but he was just standing there and he had this big, hot, piping cup of hot chocolate. And I stopped and I said, where'd you get the hot chocolate? He said, oh, there's like a little restaurant down the way. But he had this really thick accent, like German accent. And so I started chit-chatting. Here he's a clockmaker. When was the last time you met a clockmaker?
Never.
Never. He gets wood from the Black Forest in Germany, makes clocks, and had this teeny tiny little shop. I didn't go in right away. I did go get my hot chocolate because that's who I am. But I did go back into this little store and I was like, this is the coolest little clock store. I couldn't afford a thing in it, but it was so much fun just to like walk in and, oh my God, I had no idea that was still a thing. Yeah. Clockmakers.
Curious. Yeah, that's good. Anything else you wanted to talk about? What are you curious about this year?
Wow. Boy, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah, well, this one will probably come out in March, maybe April. I will put this out, but people can listen to it whenever.
I think at this point in my world, I'm more curious about, and I know it sounds silly, but I do want to see more of, for as much as I love traveling, and I do love traveling, I want to explore more of even just the United States. Like on my bucket list, which has been there this thing has been placehold for a long time, is going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Ohio. Now, I know for a lot of people, it's like, meh, or why don't you just go and get it over with? I love music so much that I cannot wait to get there and just lose myself in it. Like Dad or you would lose yourself in a history museum, I am very well prepared to lose myself in this music museum. I can't wait for that.
That's fun. That's a fun one.
Because I'm very curious about so many. I love all music, and I know that comes from my dad. I love all music, and I can't wait to see what they have. I can't wait.
I've got two things that I'm curious about this year. One, I don't think it'll happen this year, but I want to go hike drive combination through the Alps. I want to start in Germany. I want to go to Austria, Switzerland, Italy, France. I'm probably missing something in there. But I want to see the mountains are all relatively the same, but the people and the little cultures and the microcultures that make up I want to go experience that and see how these people have lived and what's important to them and learn from them. That's like the fun thing I want to go do. Then the more like practical, nerdy, I want to figure out how can we be more self-reliant at home? How can we generate better food for ourselves, power, water? Like I want to make the protective part of me wants to make sure that the kids and Elizabeth, I can learn as much as I can so that we know how to do things on our own and don't have to rely on everybody else for everything. So those are my two like areas of wonder that I want to look at this year.
That's awesome. Those are excellent. Excellent. I always say one of my favorite places we ever visited was Switzerland. And yeah, when you're in looking at those Alps, we found this teeny tiny little town at the base. I don't even remember what town it was. It had 7 or 8 houses in it. And we went into this little store and got cheese and bread and wine and just sat at this little park. We were just sitting in this sweet little town looking at these Alps. It's Stuff like that is magnificent to see. And like you said, for a lot of people, they may never leave their town. I get it. Financially, it's a lot. Travel is a lot.
We're not rich hoity-toity people either. This is going to take many years to save up and go do these things. I'm not getting on some plane that I own and flying somewhere. I'm selling some stuff, and I'm going to be saving for a while.
Right. But even for a lot of people, like it's like an unattainable thing. But I still say that's where that curiosity, you can jump on your computer and it will take you to the Alps. One of my very sweet memories is going back to when my brother-in-law Bob was very sick, and he didn't have long for this world. One of his bucket list items was to see all the national parks. And you, very sweetly, you were a teenager, sat with him on a couch one day, and you had created or gone to this page and you visited all the national parks with him on a computer. That to me that's such a gift, and that's a fun thing to be able to do. If you cannot travel, do it. Go look, go research that way, because I think that's spectacular.
Yeah, the episode's on curiosity, not travel. So be curious in whichever way makes sense to you.
And again, you mentioned Nikki earlier, who will be 104 this year, who has constantly been curious her entire life. Her entire life, always curious, not only about people, because she's very good with that, but curious about different forms of art. For her, it was delving into the art world and different mediums. And yeah, that was always fascinating to her. And I love that. There is always something, I think, in us that drives us to be curious.
All right. I think that's a good place to end. How about you?
No, I think that's awesome. I'm going to be curious about how I make my backdrop here look.
Okay, I've got a green screen, so mine's going to change.
Guest bedroom / office.
We work with what we got.
With what we got. That's exactly right. I'm curious to see if there's a way to get. I'm going to add that to my list. If there's a way to get rid of my jowls this year that doesn't cost like a lot of money.
Yeah, mine is exercise and closing my mouth after 6.
Same. Well, Girl Scout cookies did show up, so I got a couple extra jowls going on.
Yeah, we don't know about those. I don't want to know about them. I've got some chickpea chips here that I need to eat.
Yuck. I'm not going to be curious about chickpea chips. Nope. I believe you. All
right, everybody. Thanks for joining us and hanging in there through our curiosity episode. Hopefully you were curious enough to make it all the way through. If you were, thank you for listening. Stay tuned for our next episode next week.
Thanks, everybody. Stay well.
Take care. That's it for today's episode of Mom and I Unfiltered. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for another episode coming soon. I'm your co-host, Patrick Riley, alongside my mom, Kathy Riley. Have a great day.